Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. We've got another fantastic guest again this week. Ex-Celtic and Dundee legend and a number of other clubs, Partick Thistle, Greenock Morton to name a couple more. And a very experienced manager as well. It's Mr. Barry Smith. How you doing, Barry?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, mate. It's our pleasure. You're an absolute legend, mate. So I know that a lot of Dundee fans are excited to see this episode. A lot have been talking about it and stuff, so very excited, mate.
Good stuff.
So on this channel, Barry, we like to go back to the very start, mate. You're a youngster growing up in Paisley. What's your earliest memories playing football, kicking a ball and that a bit?
I think I can remember I had an older brother played in the school team. He was 4 years older than me, and I always remember playing in his. I managed to get a 2-minute game at the end of his primary 6 game. I think it was. I was only in primary 2, I think. So that's my earliest memory. It's one of the things. I grew up. My dad had played junior football in Ayrshire, and pretty much I grew up with playing football for a really early age. So that's probably my earliest memory. But talking about when we went into sort of youth football, I played with Barhead Boys Club for maybe 3 or 4 years. Managed to win the Scottish Cup with them at youth level, which was a tremendous achievement at that time. And then from Barhead I went to Celtic and sort of played with Giffin up north in between times before I went full time with Celtic.
Do you remember the moment that Celtic approached you and stuff?
Aye, it was quite strange. It was back in the day. It was the S forms we used to sign, no longer with us. But they'd asked me over the Easter weekend to come up, and I got asked to sign an S form. I grew up sort of watching St Mirren as a kid. That was the local team. I went and watched them. And they'd never actually came and watched me play with my youth team at Barhead. Weren't really interested. And then I signed with Celtic in the S form, and St Mirren came up to the door about 3 days later and asked me to sign for them. And I said, well, it's too late now. You had your chance. I'm a Paisley boy. And the thing is, probably at that time, just because I'd watched St Mirren, I'd probably have signed for St Mirren before I'd went to Celtic.
That just due to because it was local and it was kind of your team?
Aye, probably. Just because I'd followed St Mirren and, I guess I knew more about the St Mirren players, and I probably have, wanted to stay local, a wee bit of loyalty to the local team,
I was going to say, who played for St Mirren at that point then?
It was like Ian Ferguson. It was the team that 1987, the team that won the Scottish Cup. So it's like Ian Ferguson, Campbell Money, Brian Hamilton, Davy Winnie, they type of guys that were. They ended up heroes winning the Scottish Cup in 1987,
Yeah, definitely. But you made your professional debut with Celtic at 17. How did you find that? Did you find that intimidating, or were you more excited, buzzing to get on the pitch type of deal?
I think I was in shock. It was, I just went full time that season, and I'd been sort of training with the first team, but not that regular. But I think there was a host of injuries, and I got a call on the Friday after training. I was back at home. They said, "Listen, you're going to be in the squad for the game at Falkirk." So really taken aback. I got on. I think it was just before half time. And I went on at left back, which I'd never played before, so it was quite an experience. But I don't think I'd really had that much time to think about it. You're going to play with Celtic. You just got to go on and get. You try and take the opportunity when it comes along.
It was Liam Brady that gave you your debut, wasn't it?
Yeah, aye.
How did you get along with him?
Liam was, very good. He's obviously played at the highest level. In the reserve games, he actually played, a few reserve games as well as centre back, just because he was such a good player. He could have played anywhere in the park. So you're always learning off of guys like that. I was fortunate that at that time there was a lot of good. The system's totally different now. My upbringing playing beside guys like Tony Mowbray, Gary Gillespie, that holds you in good stead. Just experienced players that dropped down and played in the reserve for a couple of games, then went back to the first team. And that's where you learned. These guys didn't, let you get away with anything. And if you made a mistake, you get told you made a mistake. And there's a lot to be said for that. That's where, I saw it as a good upbringing, in the reserves, being able to play alongside these guys and also play against some top players,
What I wanted to ask was, sorry, Corey, at that point, there was quite a lot of problems off the park with Celtic as well, with the sack the board campaign and stuff like that. So how did you as a youngster deal with that? Did you feel that pressure?
I think as a young pro, you tend not to think too much about these things. You're just looking for the next game and the next training session. I'd probably say the senior guys, your Paul McStays, Peter Grants, it probably affected them because it was their club. They guys grew up living and breathing Celtic. It probably affected them more than it did, the young guys coming through. We didn't really think about it too much, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just going to say, back on the reserves, they must have give you advice that money couldn't buy, pretty much. I was going to say,
100%.
And stuff. Aye.
Yeah.
You ended up playing in a couple of old firms during your time at Celtic. How did that help you deal with pressure, especially at that magnitude when it comes to an old firm game?
The first game was at Ibrox, and back when actually I think it was the first time they hadn't allowed Celtic fans in to Ibrox. So for it to be my old firm debut, playing in front of 40,000 Rangers fans, no Celtic fans there to back you up, was very intimidating. But it's always a great learning experience. The second game was actually at Hampden when Celtic Park was getting redeveloped, and I get the biggest roasting of my life. Brian Laudrup, I couldn't get close to him. But he went short, he went long. I just couldn't get anywhere near him. He was a fantastic player, and actually, I probably learned more than that about myself in that game. I get took off at half time. Just because I think Tommy Burton thought I can't let him suffer anymore. I'll need to help him out here, and as a young pro, he took me off, and he obviously spoke to us about the reasons and stuff like that. But it was probably the best thing for the team at that point. So I learned a lot from that game. Again, playing against a top quality player, and Rangers were a very strong team at that stage as well. A lot of good players in that team as well.
See, that first game you're talking about, what was the score in that game? The one at Ibrox?
It was 1 each. John Collins scored a free kick.
That's what I was going to say. That was that game, aye.
Yeah. I think Mikhailichenko scored an equaliser later on. But it was very intimidating. It's an old firm game, and there's a bit of banter, but when you're not really able to give anything back, it becomes quite an intimidating place, Ibrox.
Just thinking how,
man, especially if no fans are.
Aye.
Just thinking how hard that opposition player you had, Brian Laudrup, Barcelona. I know he went to Chelsea afterwards, but there's some feat just to even last one half of him, I think, because I was a wee bit too young for Brian Laudrup, but she just watches some of the clips. He looked incredible.
Aye, I mean, again, it is a good learning experience playing against guys like that, but I just couldn't get close to him. He was he was just a fantastic player. He didn't look fast, but he was fast. He glided with the ball. Again, playing against, even when I went to Dundee, you play against like Larson, totally different type of player, but his movement was incredible. And you're trying to learn all the time as a sort of guy, playing relatively young, playing against these top players. And I tried to do that throughout my whole career, before I took it into the management side of things.
Throughout that period that you were at Celtic as well, Lou McCarry was the manager. I know that there's a couple of people who, I'll no name, but ex-Celtic players, ex-St Mirren players and that who haven't really got nice things to say about Lou, but how was your experience with him?
It was interesting. I didn't play a lot of games under Lou. His training techniques were slightly different than what most of the experienced boys were used to, and it was hard because his family were down south, and he was up here, so he wasn't there probably enough. If you were going to say, the Celtic manager, if you look at Brendan Rodgers, he's moved his family up, he's there 7 days a week. Lou probably didn't. If he looks back himself, would probably say he wasn't up there often enough to be classed as, like the Celtic manager or what would be associated with a Celtic manager. So I can understand why, all of the senior pros at that time, but probably they weren't used to that. They just weren't used to that style of management. And unfortunately, it didn't work. So there's probably proof in the pudding, that he should probably have been there a wee bit more often.
And then we spoke about him earlier, but Tommy Burns came in after that, and obviously only won the Scottish Cup, but everybody talks very highly of him. Did you get on with him well?
Aye, I mean, Tommy was I'd say a one-off. Just a total gent, great guy. When I was leaving Celtic to go to Dundee, I didn't agree with him. That I wanted to stay at Celtic and prove people wrong, but he knew that it was time for me to go. I'd been there 5 years, hadn't really made enough appearances, and it was time for me to move on. And he was doing it for my benefit, like moving me out. But obviously, when you're at Celtic, you don't want to leave. But ultimately, it was the best decision that was ever made for me. I think when Morton Beecross came in the opposite direction, I went to Dundee, and I never really looked back once I went to this. Sometimes it can be quite difficult when you leave Celtic to actually establish yourself at another team. A lot of guys have struggled after they've left Celtic, but it seemed to give me a kick up the bum basically, and I went on to play with Dundee for 10, 11 years, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And again, for as much as I'm thankful to Tommy for moving me out, I'm thankful to Jim Duffy as well for actually, taking me on board. And he was another great guy to learn from.
See, just talking about that, obviously you did move to Dundee. Did you feel like when you went to Dundee, it was like a new lease of life for you? You know what I mean? Like you could properly establish yourself in that team?
It was just an opportunity to go and play first team football on a regular basis. I spoke to Jim about it. He seen me as a sort of, he knew where he wanted to play me, he knew where the positions I could play. And it was an opportunity to go and establish myself in a first team at a good level. And, we were in the first division at the time, or the old first division. And after 2 years, we were in the Premier League. So, it turned out a good move, and it sort of spurred me on to make sure I stayed in their first team because I wanted to succeed. And also gave us that wee bit of success as well in getting to the Premier League with them.
Doing the research, so a lot of Dundee fans, they praised you for your consistency, but is there a moment or a game that kind of defined your time at Dundee?
I don't know if there was a specific game. I think I was just an honest player. Everybody knew what they were getting from us. Everybody knew they could rely on me, to be, forever I was asked to play, I would always give, what I had. But I don't think that's, it's easy to say derby games where, we beat United quite a few times. It's easy to say the derby games, but I don't think there was a specific game that you would say, well, that was where I made my name. I think throughout the years, probably when I first went up there, the fans probably weren't sure. But I think over, they quickly got to know what type of player I was and, my attributes as a fullback or as a centre back, and latterly as a centre mid as well. I think they just got to know that they could trust and rely on us, and that happened quite quickly because I was playing week in, week out.
And also, relatively quickly, you became the captain as well. So you must have had the respect of the dressing room and the manager on that pretty rapid. So how was that? Did you find a big pressure on that, or did you thrive on it, do you think?
No, I thrived, in the captaincy. I liked leading from the front. And it wasn't all about shouting and bawling at people. People knew that if they'd done wrong, that they would get told, or if we needed more off of some players, and that I would let them know. But I think I led by example more than anything else. Folk look. It's maybe a silly thing, but the first challenge in a game, if it was me and I won the ball, then folk react to that and it spurs other players on. That's the sort of type of captain I was. They knew that I had their back if it was ever, a game that was tight. They knew that as a captain I would step up to the plate. I always see it as, there's not just one captain on the pitch. Everybody's got to lead to a certain degree, but I sort of led them to that point, and I enjoyed doing that. It was something I took, on, and I actually enjoyed doing it. And in fairness, I had a lot of good teammates as well. Came through the years at Dundee, I had a lot of, guys that were good players, and I was fortunate to play with a lot of good players throughout the years at Dundee as well.
Definitely. I think a player like yourself, I think we're missing that in this day and age. A guy who does the hard work. You know what I mean? Like you're doing a lot of hard work. You're digging in the centre of the park, or as you say, centre back or whatever. I think that there's a wee bit of kind of missing that. Obviously, I'm a Celtic fan. I grew up watching Neil Lennon, Scott Brown, going back to even like Paul Lambert, and you were kind of that ilk. You know what I mean? You were a total workhorse, and you are also a great footballer.
I think every team needs somebody like that. I don't shy away. Like, I was okay with the ball. I could make passes, but that wasn't my game. My game was, breaking up play or being defensive, and as I say, every team needs somebody like that. I always say that when I won the ball, I try to get to somebody as quick as possible who's better than me on the ball, because I knew they would do something for the team, rather than relying myself. So, but I was happy doing that type of job. And I don't think you do see it as much now. But I think maybe the laws of the game are, I never ever get sent off for a bad tackle, but always won tackles. Now I think it's more difficult, just because of the laws and the interpretation of how you tackle. It sort of maybe stops, guys from actually being that type of player as much now.
How would you fare the modern game? Most teams are now playing from the back and try to keep the ball on the ground. Do you think you would be all right there, or would you?
I know. As I say, I could play. I was more comfortable, breaking up play and being defensive, and but I think it's great teams play out for the back as long as there's a purpose to it. You know, even your Man Cities, if they can't play out for the back, they will look long. And it's about trying to get the best out of the players that you've got and what the opposing team's doing at that time. So, I'd be quite comfortable playing in, you know, at this stage, being able to get on the ball. It would just, you know, you would have to adapt, I guess, to the style of play now that is more recognised.
Barry, a couple of months ago we had Gavin Ray on the show, and I was telling him that how much I absolutely loved the Benetti years, you know, that team that you were in. Yourself, him, you know, Nimzadze, Juan Sara, Caballero, Ravanelli, I could go on and on, mate, just an amazing team. But how did you find that period of time, and did you get on with the Benetti brothers okay?
It was absolute chaos. You never knew what was happening day to day. But it was, you know, it was enjoyable. You know, like if you're, speaking for myself, but a wee guy from Paisley going to play with Caniggia, you know, you don't even dream of things like that because you don't expect anything like that ever to happen. But it was, you know, the players that they brought in, and you know, there was a good mixture of Scottish boys like Gavin Ray, Wally Faulkner, Big Lee Wilkie. There was a good core of Scottish boys, Stephen Tweed as well, that sort of probably allowed them to play, allowed them to do their thing. You know, the foreign boys that had come in. The Benettis were. They were what they were. I actually still, I'm still in contact with Dario. Just, you know, he was an honest guy. I'd probably say he was a manager. Ivano was there as a manager, but I'd probably say Dario was the sort of, he was a coach, you know, the head coach, it would probably be called now. He did all this sort of tactical stuff. It was just a strange time, you know, that like the dressing rooms were split down the middle. All the foreign boys got changed in one dressing room, all the Scottish boys got changed in another, and it didn't really. If you were looking for the outside, you go, that's not a team. That just can't work. But for some reason, once we got in the park, everybody clicked. You know, and we had a very successful season. Or the first season was very successful. Getting into the top six. But I think people forget that before they'd come in, Jockey Scott had took us into the top six as well. And probably, I think he actually got us our highest position. So for as much as there was a lot of change with the Benettis coming in, there's still a good core of Scottish boys there that kept everything, you know, steady and made sure that everything was done properly as well on the pitch.
Absolutely, and I was actually saying that to Gavin as well, how at Ivano, you're saying there he wasn't really the manager, but he's never went on to manage another club. I couldn't believe that when I read that. He's never took another job as management.
Yeah, as I say, I think Dario was probably the head coach. Ivano was the one that could speak fluent English. Don't get me wrong, Ivano took certain parts of the training session, but it was predominantly Dario that did all that sort of stuff. And if I'm being honest, I'm not really surprised Ivano didn't go back in as a manager anywhere. I think he liked the style and liked the thought of being a manager, but I'm not sure he actually wanted to. I don't think it was him. You know, I think he didn't like that sort of. He didn't know how to deal with players, probably. You were either in or you were out. There was no in between, which again is good, but a lot of the Scottish boys get put out quite quickly. You know, and that it probably wasn't done the right way either.
Yeah, but he was a character though, wasn't he? You know, you don't really. That's another thing you don't really get in modern football anymore. Characters like him. I mean, I remember you got the top six, man. See the celebrations he was on crazy that day, wasn't he?
Up at Aberdeen. I mean, they were different. They were definitely different. As I say, it was hard just to see a lot of the Scottish boys sort of go by the wayside. But my thoughts were, well, if I want to be at Dundee, you have to just basically, do as much as you can to be in that team. Unfortunately, I managed to keep myself in there as part of the squad, and again, there was good guys around about us as well.
Just talking about that, like all the foreigners through that period, like I say, Caniggia, Ravanelli. For my pick, obviously you're going to know more than me, but for my pick, all the players, the foreign boys, Nimzadze, man, he was outstanding, wasn't he?
Oh, he was brilliant. He was up there with as good as I played with. He was just a fantastic player, a good guy off the park. He didn't speak much English, but his broken English, he would always try and have a laugh with the boys. He'd try to mix. But on the pitch, some of the things he could do with the ball. I don't know if you remember, actually, we played Celtic at Parkhead, and he's actually flicked it over. I can't remember who the defender was. He actually ran, and while he's running, he's flicked it over a Celtic defender's head and got on the other side of it. He just, technically, he was unbelievable. But again, a really good guy off the park. Well, he was probably the best out of the lot. Caniggia was a really good guy. No airs or graces. Just, he's been in World Cup finals, but you would never have known the way he came into training. I think he ended up in one of the bars in Dundee pouring pints once we'd beat United one time as well, So he was just he was a good guy. But as I say, Georgie was probably up there with the best.
But obviously, you were the captain at this point, so how did you ever have to kind of like get him chin one of these boys or whatever and tell them to get, telling Ravanelli or Caniggia to get a grip of themselves? Or?
Yeah, I was always respectful. These guys have played at the highest level. I think you've got to know you're wrong in the ladder, So the thing was, I was still learning off of these guys, and as I say, I think you've got to be respectful to the level that they've played at. Some of the other ones, I wasn't, shy. I think the guy Juan Sara was, really arrogant. Actually, had a go at him. He was a good player, but he was really arrogant towards some of the other boys. And I don't think that's right. If you're part of a team, you treat each other, well. And a couple of times he wasn't very, to the younger ones, he wasn't very good. So it's like anything else. If you see something wrong, then you want to make sure that it stops. And I didn't like the way he was treating some of the younger kids.
That's interesting to hear, because he wasn't really like a first team regular, Juan Sara, wasn't he? Really. He came off the bench quite a lot, I remember. He did score quite a few goals and stuff, but for him to be doing that, I mean, I could talk about his team all night, but I think we should probably move on at this point.
I was going to say, do you think he was maybe thinking he was, like, no disrespect to Dundee, but better than Dundee?
Yeah.
Do you think that was the issue? But, aye.
100%. He thought he was better than. He actually thought he was a better. He scored a lot of goals, but his link-up play and all that sort of stuff wasn't great. The one sadly passed away recently. Caballero was by far the better player. He was. If he hadn't did his cruciate, he'd have went. He would definitely get sold for over £1 million. He was a very good striker, but once he did his cruciate, he never really worked hard enough to get himself back to fitness. So never really reached the levels that he should have. But he was another terrific player, Caballero.
I was going to say, after 11 years with Dundee, you decided to go to Iceland with Valur. How did that come about, and was it a bit of a culture shock when you got there?
I knew the last two games, myself and Bobby Mann had actually taken charge of Dundee. I think it was Alan Kernahan had been sacked, and Peter Marr had asked myself and Bobby Mann to take the team for the last two games. And at that stage, I knew another new manager was coming in. I'd been there 11 years, and I thought, you know what, it's probably time to move on. give it the new manager coming in a clean slate. And just by chance, I got a phone call for, it was actually David Winnie. He'd played at KR Reykjavik. He phoned us up and says, listen, there's a club in Iceland looking, I've put your name forward, would you fancy it? And I went, well, let me have a wee think about it. He says, you've not got long, they want you over on Sunday. So I actually played the last game of the season on the Saturday, and I flew out straight after it. And it was a bit of a cult. I didn't play for the first 10 games. Didn't start. I don't think I started one game in the first 10. And I remember sitting with the manager, a guy Willem, and he was as crazy as a bag of cats. He was mental. And I sat with him, and he said, there's one game where you need to play in the reserve team against KR. And I went and played in the game, and he came over to us after the game and he said, you will start this week. I was like, right, no problem. I wasn't, I would never cause any problems or anything like that. I was like, right, no problem. And I started the next game, we won it, and I think we went on, we were unbeaten for the rest of the season. And then the following season, we won the league. And I think I played every game as well that season. But again, it was probably just down to the changing culture. It was they trained at all their players worked during the day, and then trained at 5:30. We trained from 5:30 to 7:30. But they trained every day, so it was kind of full time, but it wasn't full time for them because they had their other job. So it was a sort of strange. It was for me trying to get used to training. What was I going to do during the day? It was like I could have sat about all day. I ended up trying to get myself into a routine by going to the gym in the morning, and then doing some technical work in the afternoon before they would come in at 5:30 to train. But it took a wee while for me to find my feet in that sense. But once I did, I never looked back. And it was actually at that stage of my career, it's what I needed. I was over there for 3 years and absolutely loved it. I still got across and meet the guys that I played with. Normally every second year I go across and meet them just because it was a really good team spirit, and it's a thoroughly enjoyable time for myself.
What about level-wise in the football? Did you think that it was how do you compare it to your life in Scotland when you were playing?
I'd probably say it was the sort of bottom end Premier League, top end of the Championship. Again, I think that was just, I went across in 2006, I think it was. And it was just when Iceland were becoming, they'd got all the facilities correct, their indoor facilities. There was a lot of good players coming through. And that's when the Icelandic team, the national team, started getting better. So the standard was decent, and I think they've only improved since then as well. They went on to bigger and better things. Even in the I think in their Vikingar made the Europa League type thing as well last year, I think. So they've definitely improved throughout the years, and as I say, the level was decent when I went across there.
That's one thing I've always admired in a player, though. Like somebody, I know you're you were only a young guy at the time, like 31, I think you were at that point when you went over to Iceland. But it's still to be admired even back then. It's something rare that Scottish players actually leave the country and go abroad somewhere. Even now, it's happening more and more often with younger guys and that, but I think it should have been happening for a long time, to be honest.
My biggest advice would be, if you get the opportunity, go and try something different. You never know, and at the worst, you would still come back here and get a club back in Scotland. It doesn't matter what age you are. I think it's been brilliant for Scottish football. The 3 guys getting across there, 4, or maybe even 5, getting across to Italy, playing in Serie A. It's great for the Scottish game, but what an experience it must be for them, to be across there. playing at that level. And it doesn't matter what level, everybody will find that level abroad as well. So advice would go and try it. I mean, you get none from it, you'll get experience. And it's definitely an experience I enjoyed as well.
Since we're just talking about this, what would you say to let a guy like Lennon Miller right now, who's 18-year-old? Obviously, everybody's saying that he's the next big thing in that. Would you say stay at Motherwell, or would you say try something new at this point?
I think at this point he's probably. I know he's still young. I think he's got to pick the right team because he's still got to develop as a player, and he's still got to get game time. If he was going to leave Motherwell and go to a club that wasn't going to play him and saw him as a something for the future, maybe 2 or 3 years, I'm not sure he's going to progress. I think he'd be better going and playing games because that's where he'll learn far more, playing the games. He'll learn more about himself, learn more about the position he plays in. So I think the next move for him's a big one. In terms of picking the right club, I think Motherwell have done great. How they've brought him through their system and given him the game time at the right time and looked after him in that sense. But I think it's also time for him to look out with Motherwell, just based on if he can get games. You can never guarantee you're going to play, but he needs to play games. I don't think there'd be any real reason for him to move elsewhere if he wasn't going to play games. So that would probably be my advice to him.
I'd probably say, if he was to move on, well, to be honest, I would say stay at Motherwell for another year. But if he was to move on, I would think maybe down to the English Championship, something like that. I don't think Celtic or Rangers is the right move for him because you say you're not guaranteed to play at these teams.
Yeah. Especially, Celtic are so strong. They might see him as, maybe in a couple of years. But where's he going to be for they to be getting games here and there? I just think at that age he needs to play games. Just to gain more experience and become a better player for it.
Definitely. We touched on it a wee bit before, but you won the league with Villa, and it was the first time in 20 years, is that right?
Yeah.
How was the parties after that? Was stories there?
No, it was great. They actually got 2 guys to Scotland, bagpipe players, and they flew them over from Scotland to for the final game. We won the league in the final game of the season. I always remember we were back. There was a sort of gathering with all the players and the families and the sponsors back at the home ground, and I was thinking that they were like, we'll get the bagpipers up to pipe, a couple of tunes, and there was only one of them. The other one had drank that much. They think he couldn't play the bagpipes, so he was drunker than everybody else. But it was, Valla are a big team, and for them not to have won a championship for 20 years was a big thing. So it was great to be part of that. And again, the celebrations were like maybe the Saturday night, but come the Sunday, all the guys were getting back to work on the Monday, so it was pretty much cut short. They didn't they didn't have the opportunity to celebrate for days on end as they probably would have done years ago.
After that, you kind of had a couple of loan spells back here at Partick Thistle and Morton. Was that just did you just want to come back home basically?
Aye, well, their season ran from May to October. So I would play May to October, then come back, go on holiday for a couple of months, or take a break for October to December, and then I would do a pre-season myself. And at that time, I went in and worked with Dick Campbell and Jim McInally allowed me into Morton as well. But actually, I'd been speaking to Dick, and he'd said, oh, "Listen, we're maybe keen to sign you." And then I never heard from him for a week, and he phoned me up. And this was his selling point. Now, I've got a lot of time for Dick, I know him really well. His selling point was, you're getting 400 quid a week. I need an answer in 5 minutes. Right back's like you're 10 a penny. And I thought, oh, thanks very much, Dick. That was nice of you. So, I ended up signing from him, actually. Like, as I say, I got on quite well with Dick, and I signed with him, but he lost his job maybe about, I think it was about April that season. And then I just went back to Iceland for, come May. But I just didn't want to, because their season's only May to October, I didn't want to be sitting from October to the following May doing nothing. So I always wanted to keep playing, and I got the opportunity to do that at Partick and then Morton, and then the third year when I come back, the third year, Jim Duffy was manager at Brecon, and that's me come in as well. So I ended up getting in there and playing.
Right, definitely. How far in? Well, sorry. How long did it take you to realise you wanted to be a manager? After a playing career.
I think when I went across to Iceland, I ended up taking their 18s team, and that's where I sort of. I'd always. We took the 2 games at the end of the season before I went to Iceland, and I quite liked, being a manager. I liked taking the training and stuff like that. And then when I went across to Iceland, I took the 18s, and I get more involved in the coaching side. The manager would always ask my opinion in certain things as well. So I sort of got a feel for it then. And then in my last year in Iceland, Jockey got the job at Dundee, got the job again at Dundee, and he phoned me up and he said, "Listen, there's a job there's a job available as the 18s coach at Dundee." And when they offered, like he said to us, "Listen, would you like to take it?" I had no hesitation, because I felt at that stage my sort of football career was tailing off, and the next step for me was to go into coaching. And it was a sort of natural flow going into coaching at that stage, and taking the 18s. And again, it was a hard group, the 18s that year. They were sort of quite boisterous, should I say, and it was a steep learning curve when I went back to Dundee, but thankfully it held us in good stead, because the groups after that were easy to handle once I'd handled the group before. So it was just a sort of natural progression for us to go into coaching at that stage.
And obviously in 2010 you took over at Dundee in a very difficult period. Well, how was your emotions at that point? Obviously, it must have been a dream as well, as obviously a sad time for people who'd lost their jobs and stuff.
Aye, it's a mixture of emotions. It's quite strange to think that there's people losing their jobs, yet I'm getting a promotion for the 18s coach to the manager. So it was hard to sort of get your head around that. But ultimately, there was a job that needed done. If it wasn't me that took it, somebody else would have took it. And I was grateful for getting the opportunity to keep my job first and foremost, because a lot of good people, not just in the playing side and the coaching staff, lost their jobs, but a lot of good people off the pitch that I'd known for a long time, that'd been at the club for a long time, lost their jobs as well. So it was a real mixture of emotions, but once you've accepted it, you've just got to go on with it, because it was too important at that stage, to sit and dwell on things and overthink things. It was just about getting the job done, and making sure that the club come out of administration, and we sort of survived that 25-point deduction as well.
Aye, well, clearly that attitude is one of the reasons why they picked you, mate, because you're reliable in the park and you're a club legend captain, and obviously they turned to you in their time of need. And so, how did you find your time as a manager with Dundee? Did you enjoy doing it, or was it a lot of pressure, or how did you feel?
No, I mean, I think management at any club's stressful because there's a lot going on, not just in the football side of things. Again, it's kind of, fortunate. I always feel fortunate and lucky that I had such a long playing career, and then, getting the opportunity to manage the club I'd played for so long. You always feel lucky and fortunate that you were able to do that. But I enjoyed every minute of it. It is stressful. It's not just stressful for you, it's stressful for your family, especially staying in the city. So there's a lot of good things, there's a lot of negative things, but I think the opportunity is always, that you want to grasp opportunities like that. And, I think I did well enough, unfortunately, latterly, when we get promoted to the Premier League. We weren't ready. Probably wasn't ready myself as a coach to get into the Premier League. I'd pretty much been thrown into the deep end when I took over with no management experience, really. And when we set out a 3-year plan, and the first year was to make sure we survived after the 25-point deduction. The second year was to build a team that wasn't going to get promoted, but it would be strong enough in the third year to get promoted, and then strong enough to go further into, like when we got to the Premier League. We get promoted after the second year because Rangers came down to the third division at the time. And I probably didn't have the right experience. I probably just wasn't ready myself. But also the squad that we'd built was a squad that was going to win the championship. So it was fully attacking players. Not really with good defenders, but when you got that to that next level, maybe weren't ready for it either. And a year together, if that team had stuck together for a year and went up the following year, then it would have been more a collective team. Whereas we'd just, started getting players in for the second season. So it was. That was the tough part of it. Listen, when you look at results, and that's what you're judged on, then I couldn't sit here and say, yeah, the results weren't good enough the year we went up to the Premier League. But when you look at the circumstances, you just wish you'd been given a wee bit more time. But unfortunately, board members or, senior staff have different ideas, and some, want to look after themselves rather than look after what's right for the club. And unfortunately, I was a victim of that as well at that stage.
Well, mate, a guy's just won the Europa League there and been sacked, so I know exactly what you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just that's another thing that happens in football too much. Is look what's happened with Hibs. You know what I mean? They've sacked manager after manager after manager. They don't give you guys a chance. They gave David Gray a bit of a chance, and look at the turnaround there. So I totally agree with the manager.
Yeah.
You needed more time, and you just don't get that, unfortunately, in this day and age.
Nah, it's just the way. I mean, I look at Michael Tizzer, a young upcoming manager. Kelty Hearts goes in full time at Dunfermline, gets 7 games or 8 games. It's crazy. It's just if you take that long to decide that you want the manager, then stick by him, give him a chance. And I think there's a massive percentage that are young guys that get one opportunity, and they only get one opportunity at management, and the percentage that never get another manager's job is huge, and you wonder why that is. And I think that's one of the as you say, it's about getting time, and it's not going to happen overnight. To get success, you've got to build, something, be given that opportunity to build. unfortunately, it doesn't really happen nowadays for whatever reason.
You say the results weren't good enough in your time in the Premier League, but this is the thing I've been talking to Dundee fans about lately. Is like Tony Docherty, obviously, has just been sacked, but he took the club into the top six last season. This season, they avoid relegation, and what I'm basically trying to say here is, let's see a club like Dundee, clubs like not just Dundee though, clubs like Kilmarnock, kind of that ilk. What is it they're expecting for a season? What is it? Surely beating relegation is a success.
Yeah, again, I don't know how how you determine what the owners are looking for at all these clubs. How they sit down at the start of the season. Do they say, well, we've looked at the budget, our budget's in the top six, we should be top six? That's not the way it works, because I know up at Dundee, like Kevin being the manager, you kind of pay a premium to get players up here. Because a lot of the players are based in the West Coast. So if Motherwell offers them £400 for talk's sake, Dundee would have to offer them £500, £600 to get them up to Dundee. So then that means that your budget's actually you're not actually using the same money for your budget. So I don't know how they determine it. I think Stephen Presley's been told that they want to be in the top six this next season, and I think that's a tall ask. I think if you're a Dundee team, then after 3 or 4 years in the Premier League, then you should be looking to progress. But I think the second year is always notoriously difficult for a team that's been promoted. Once you get through that, you're then going to 3 years. Then you should have a core of players that know the system, know what's expected, and then you can, the fourth year, you're again pushing towards the top six. But I don't think anybody looks at that long term. I think everybody just wants that. Yeah, we've got this amount of money, we should be in the top six. Football doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And there's a lot of good managers have lost their jobs and not been given the right time to actually progress the team the way they would like.
I agree with you. Obviously, it is the board and stuff, but also I think the fans as well. I mean, the fans, I believe, have contributed to a guy like Tony Docherty going, because they're all going on about how many goals Dundee lost last season. But then I was saying, well, would you rather a manager come in, you don't lose as many goals, but you get relegated? Surely, staying up for me for a team like that is enough. But again, that's, as you say, it's, but they start off. I think Dundee, they want top six, but I think, as you say, that's really hard.
I think it'll be tough, bringing, because they've barely got a squad at the moment, so it's going to be a lot of new players. Try to gel them together. It'll be tough. I think Tony probably was really unlucky in getting in the top six in his first year, because they overachieved. I don't think they should be ashamed to say that they overachieved. But then it puts pressure on you, because every day the expectation levels rise. When actually, if he was given the chance to build, then you can then maybe expect more. But I think just because he got in the top six, everybody thought, we'll get in the top six a year after. But again, the second year's always more difficult, trying to get into that top six. Plus, Aberdeen and Hibs both had far better seasons than had the previous. And probably Hearts was the one that sort of didn't materialise the way they wanted this year.
Plus, Dundee lost their captain at a crucial time as well. I think a lot of people forget that.
Aye, going to Celtic, it's a big. It was a sort of mainstay of their midfield. Did extremely well in there, and you lose him. I think it was August, wasn't it? Just at the start of the season. So yeah, tough, very tough.
Aye. Back to your managerial career, you've managed in Scotland and also in England with Aldershot. But how did those experiences differ? Was there a bigger standard level in Scotland that you didn't really see in England, or vice versa?
I think, I mean, the Aldershot was, the National League's a decent league. It's very physical. Generally, I think Forest Green won it the year I was there. They spent lots of money. They were probably the best team in the league. They actually played. They get the ball down and played. But the majority of the teams, it is get the ball forward, and they'll get a big striker and they play off them, and it's still a decent standard for down there. But the difference, I think, up here is it's like everything Scottish football's physical, but down there, like the actual physicality of the players is bigger. They're just athletes, down there. Up here, I enjoyed my spells at Alloa. I was fortunate that the chairman there, Mike Mulroney, was excellent. Just let me go on with the job. He says, he's basically, well, you're the football guy. You do what you've got to do on the football pitch. And we had a successful time there. And I left there to go down to Aldershot just because it was full time. I wanted back into full time football. Come back up the road after Aldershot with my wife had my wee one, and we're spending too much time away from at home. So I come back up the road and went into Wraith, and I saw East Fife. Really enjoyed it in at East Fife. Great wee club. And then went from there to the Wraith Rovers, which wasn't too popular, given it's a local rivalry. But again, it was the opportunity to go full time. At Wraith, I felt we had a really good team at Wraith. A lot of good experience. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be the season to get promoted. And I left the following season. But no, the standard in Scotland is I think the difference between part-time and full-time is that the players take things on board a wee bit better at full-time level, and that's why they're playing a wee bit higher level. There are a lot of good part-time players, a lot of guys that have decided to go part-time for whatever reason. They've got a good job. I think Rory McAllister springs to mind. Could probably play at a far higher level, but he had a good job and wanted to stay part-time. And he's had an excellent career. I think he just signed for Fun, but he's had an excellent senior career and scored a load of goals, and didn't really want to go full-time, I don't think. So there are a lot of good part-time players, that just decide to stay part-time. But I think the biggest difference is that the taking on board information at the different levels is probably what makes them different in full-time players to part-time players.
See, during your managerial career, how did you handle the pressure and the scrutiny of being the manager?
Well, as you know, I'm not on a lot of social media, so I don't really.
A lot easier.
I don't go into social media. I don't go into websites, and I think the more you stay clear of them, the better it is. It's easy to get caught up, with guys that on that post. And listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I just think when it becomes really personal, it's not right. So I just don't have social media. I don't go on it, and I think that probably helped. The sort of being able to know get involved with what the fans are thinking, and be able to stay true to yourself in that sense. The pressure, I mean, you're under pressure to win games. that's, you've just got to be able to handle that. You've just got to be able to do your job and know that you're doing the job to the best of your ability. And any job I've walked away from, I know that I've gave everything I've got. At the time I was at the club, I've never left anything, outside. I've took everything to the door and made sure that I've looked after everybody at the club the way I would want looked after. So always walk away and think, look at what I could have done better in terms of, you always want to look back and learn. But in terms of, giving any more effort or, to the job in hand, I've never left anything. I've gave everything wherever I've been.
Right. Last couple of questions, mate. I wanted to ask you about what was your experience of going out to Pittsburgh? What happened there?
It's a strange story. A guy contacted me. He says, listen, I'm starting up a team in Pittsburgh. I've looked at your profile. Would you come over and, be our manager stroke technical director? And it was just as COVID was happening. And we were talking, and I'm like, it sounds good. And conversations were going well. We agreed a contract, and then COVID hit. And he said, well, listen, I still want you over. I was like, but can't fly, with quarantine and all that stuff. It's okay. We'll fly you into Mexico City, and then you can fly from Mexico City into the US, and you're fine. And I'm going, that's not right. So I just I ended up saying to him, listen, we'll leave it at the moment, and we'll see how it goes, in the next, 4 or 5 months. But the league they were in was I think it was NPSL, which was quite low over in the States. I think they lasted about a year. And after COVID, I still keep in touch with the guy Michael Anton Mansour. I still keep in touch with him. He's actually the owner of a club in Gibraltar now. And he's asked me to get across a couple of times. And I keep saying, no, I'm quite happy in Scotland at the moment. But so I actually never went across, just due to COVID. It never really happened. And then he left Pittsburgh to go to Gibraltar. And as I say, he asked me to go with him. But I say, at that point, I decided I was going to stay in Scotland. So. But he's still in Gibraltar. It's Manchester 62. He's actually the owner of now. I think they're doing fine. They're doing all right across there. So strange story, but it's one of these things that happens in football.
Might get a wee holiday in Gibraltar soon.
I know, man.
I know. But he actually he texted me that was a couple of months ago. Saying, we still like you to come over, but it's just, it's not really, I think they're part-time, and it's not feasible to go over and, work there part-time. But as I say, if they ever go full-time, he knows where I am, so he'll give me a phone.
we live very different lives, mate. You're getting text messages asking you to go to Gibraltar. I'm getting text messages asking me to go back to Paisley, so... So mate, last question. I don't think you're involved in the game anymore, aren't you? At the moment.
No, I help out at Dundee's academy, but it's the job I had sort of limited my time. I didn't think it was fair on the kids that I couldn't give them everything. As I say, once I'm in, I'm full in, and I couldn't make training sessions, and I didn't think it was fair on them. Because they need a coach there all the time that they get used to, and you want to help along. So I'm still involved, but no involved there. But again, it's that type of thing that I would love to get back in. It's just trying to get that opportunity to get back in. As I said, young managers are, I was young. I got an opportunity. Young managers I think should get the opportunity as well. But I think they do need somebody with a wee bit of experience like myself, maybe just to help them along the road. If that was the case, it's something that I would definitely be interested in as well. And being a manager in my own right is definitely something I'd be keen to look at again. But it's just trying to get that opportunity. Somebody looking at the success that I've had previously and saying, yeah, he's the man for their club. So whether it happens or no, I don't lose sleep over it. Quite happy doing what I'm doing, but I'm a football guy, and I like working in football. So if you know anybody out there that's looking for something, give us a shout.
Will do, mate. Will do,
Well
man.
done, man.
Rangers have just appointed somebody, so that's that one out the window now. No, I was hoping you would say that, mate. I really would like to see you back in the game. You're too much of a legend to boot it, man. It's time that you get back involved and share your experiences with the youngsters like you've shown with us today. So, thanks very much for your time, Barry. You've been as brilliant as I thought you were going to be, mate. I could sit and talk to you all night. I'm sure if Corey feels the same.
Definitely.
And thanks very much and all the best for the future, pal.
No, thanks very much for having us on, guys. Different class, and it's been, great to chat to you as well.
No bother, mate. You'll be getting another invite at some point. Don't worry. Hopefully, you'll come back on.
Aye, brilliant. Definitely.
Cheers, mate.